that should be fine too. So the plan was to talk a little bit about a new project that we have been working on for the past 3 years by now. So the tool is called Cerebrate, and basically it is a tool for community orchestration and various other tasks that go along with it. So you may have heard of us already as Team CIRCL, also in regards to the other tool that we're building called MISP. So we're really into building communities and information sharing. So we also try to make our own lives easier, and this is one of those tools that we've built that first and foremost also helps us and other organizations like us that are in providing communities and community tooling for various different communities out there. So it was built in the umbrella of the MISP project. So this is a project funded by the EU, and the idea is to build common tooling for the European CSIRT network. So that includes a full toolbox of different tools that are supposed to interoperate with each other. MISP is one of those, and now Cerebrate is one of those tools that handles kind of a central component of this network. The idea is also obviously to make this available to everyone, so it's open source, freely available for everyone. So whatever we do in the European CSIRT network, everyone can replicate by just building the same tool or interconnecting the same tools and deploying the same tools. We have a very strong focus on open source tooling. And we're also looking to include other tools that we haven't thought of in the initial wave. So if you have ideas for interconnection, just reach out to us. So a little bit about the different types of tasks that we're trying to take care of. So first of all, one of the big parts that we've been struggling with over a long time in our communities was contact management. So contact management, not just from a human-to-human perspective, where we want to find out who is the responsible party in another organization that we need to approach, but also how to instruct our tools to exchange information with other parties that are in our community or that are just parts of smaller sub-communities. The other thing as a CSIRT that is really annoying for us very often is the time we lose in constituency lookups. That means that when you're sharing information, we need to first figure out who's the responsible national CSIRT, for example, to get in touch with in order to ask for help with takedown requests, incident response, and so on. So one of the things that we also wanted to solve is to be a constituency registry for a community where you can highlight what sort of IP ranges, what sort of ASs you're responsible for, and so on and so forth. So other than that, also we have a bunch of different tools in our CSIRTs, and we want to interconnect those tools with each other. MISP being one of those tools that we interconnect with our partners to exchange information, but there are a bunch of other tools in this landscape that also fit in there. For example, Intel and Q and some other tools that you also find if you look up what MISP really contains. And the idea was to make this whole process easier. Right now, we have a colleague that is pretty much spending half of his workday just handling interconnection requests with other parties that want access to our MISP instances and so on. So it's really a hassle. Other than that, we also saw a bigger rise in our communities for the need to create these smaller sub-communities. For example, in our private sector community at CIRCL, we have a specific dedicated financial sector sub-community, a sub-community for law enforcement, and so on and so forth. And these have sometimes compartmentalized sharing. Now, this is what we, via MISP, solve with sharing groups, but managing these and sending out these sharing group meta-information to parties is sometimes difficult, so we wanted to solve that as well. The other thing, cryptographic signing of data. This has been something that we've added to MISP a while ago. We wanted to ensure that we are able to sign and validate information and changes to information coming from certain parties. But for this, a good key distribution mechanism is needed in order to be able to tie which key is associated to not just which email address, this is kind of an issue that was already solved before, but also to which team. And which part of a team, so or which instance, for example, in the case of MISP. So these are the things that we also want to keep track of. So a little bit about what we do. So basically, our MISP communities, when we started out really small. So we were mostly exchanging with national CSIRTs, maybe with military CSIRTs, and that was pretty much it. So if you have a small close group, managing the constituency and the organizations themselves is something rather easy. But this has changed over time. So these communities started interconnecting with each other. They started exchanging information with each other when they saw value of exchanging, for example, attacker techniques. So we basically had a massive growth in this over time. So let's have a look at one of our use cases just to give you an idea. So, oh, this is a horribly low resolution image, I didn't realize that. So running a large community, such as you'll see we try to do, is really like herding cats. So you have a lot of different requirements, a lot of different ideas of what a community should be like and how it should work, and a lot of different special requests that organizations will have. So a little bit about some statistics from one of our MISP communities. We basically deal with, on this particular community, with 4,200 users coming from 2,000 or 1,500 local organizations. So those are organizations that actually have users in our instance. So it's really a massive community with a lot of data flowing back and forth. But also managing this is really a nightmare. So you will see that basically this has been a constant growth. So we've seen some peaks, but other than that, the growth of the community has been pretty constant since 2016. Fun fact for those of you taking a look at this picture, you can attribute some of those peaks to certain events happening. So that's always a fun little game that you can play with that. When did what campaign happen and so on, that basically got a lot of organizations to be onboarded, but that's just a small side note. But basically, one of the main reasons why we're in this situation is because we saw the need to bridge the gap between these different communities over time. We wanted to start sharing with organizations and sectors that are facing different or similar types of threats than what we're seeing. We've seen the reuse of attacker techniques across different communities happen more and more frequently, either by reusing the same tooling or simply just shifting targets to different communities. So very often we were just looking at our own sectorial little bubbles, and we were kind of stuck missing information about what already happened in a different community not that long before us. So we could have been better prepared for that. Not necessarily indicators themselves, because those are not really carrying over between these attacks, but more the techniques that are popping up. So those became more interesting. So we wanted to exchange this information with other communities. Also, something that we found in this entire process was hybrid threats. So we really hate the term because it's so kind of a buzzword for a long time now, but it's something that we're really seeing, for example, with election meddling, where you can attribute certain actions to the same actor that are picked up by completely different types of communities. Financial communities, CSIRT communities, law enforcement, or political-focused think tanks and so on. And then when you bring this information together, you get the full picture of what actually happened. Without that, you wouldn't really make sense of it. So it was quite interesting when we were working with this. With that said, we're still dealing with a lot of issues that no tool will solve for you, mostly with basically the amount of people that we need to engage with, and also the trust that you have to build with a larger community. This is why events like this are great. We can reach out to each other, get to know each other, and that's how you build trust, basically. So thanks for the organizers. This is, as always, really helpful in this entire effort. Some other issues we're trying to solve, and for those of you familiar with MISP, you will see this quite often. Managing organization metadata and organization anchor points that you can use to map information to certain parties is difficult across different tools and different communities. So we wanted to have a de facto community centralized system where the entire community can run lookups against to find out what the metadata, what the IDs and so on of a given organization are, so that they know who to communicate with. We also wanted to basically encode additional meta information based on the type of community that we're in. So as a CSIRT network, we have certain needs of what we want to be able to describe about organizations. But if you go to different other communities, for example, to FIRST, you will see that if you look at the data points within the FIRST team registry, you will have different data points than what you would have in the CSIRT network. And different pieces of information are important. For example, membership status, accreditations, and so on are all data points that you want to share with the community. So one of the things we wanted to do is a system that is flexible, that can be extended with these different types of data models easily. So yeah, that's exactly what I just talked about, so it's a bit of a shame. So our attempt to solving this issue is this new tool called Cerebrate. We're currently on version 1.4, so it's been out for a while. but it's constantly being built upon. So we're just launching the entire program for the CSIRT network at the end of the year. So there's still some stuff for us left to do, which also means that we're also looking for more input on it. So please, if you're using it or getting started with it, let us know what you're missing. The idea is also to couple this with other tools and to build strong integrations with other tools. So us as the producers of MISP, for us it was obviously natural to build tight integration and coupling with MISP. So we consider this as now as a de facto fleet management tool for MISP. So it means that if you're running multiple MISP communities, internal collection MISPs and so on, you can do yourself a favor by moving a lot of the management functions to Cerebrate rather than doing it manually across different instances. Now, a little bit about the goals in design. We also have a lot of selfish reasons why we're doing this, one of them being that we want to modernize MISP. So we basically are building this with a very similar stack to MISP. For those of you, we've had quite a few questions during the event already about when we're going to move MISP to a more modern stack. So this is kind of our answer to it. We've been building this other tool, and we want to move MISP to this code base with the stack that we're using in Cerebrate. So this was also kind of laying the groundwork for us for that. So it comes with a much newer framework than what we used before, new UI design and so on. And one of the other changes that we wanted to do is build it with an IEM-centric design. So if you want to also instruct and manage your community in terms of your IEMs management, you can do that directly from Cerebrate. So in our case, we use Keycloak, and we basically manage all of our users, their permissions, and so on from Cerebrate directly, and that instructs Keycloak with all the changes. Apart from that, similar to our previous concepts with MISP, we want everything to be automatable, so everything is exposed to the API. Everything that you can do via the tool, you can also do via the API. So yeah, so this is just an example with something that might be familiar to those of you that are using MISP. So this is MISP Cerebrate view. It's been in MISP for a while now. I don't know if anyone has actually noticed that we've added that silently. But MISP can already connect to a Cerebrate instance and pull in information about organizations, sharing groups, and so on from a central node to, rather than manually creating those things when you're enrolling users. The way the entire system is supposed to work is we exchange information from Cerebrate nodes to Cerebrate nodes. So the idea is that you can spin up your own Cerebrate node similarly to what you would do with MISP, connect it to a central node, fetch information or push information to a central node, and negotiate exchanges between the different tools. So that means that Cerebrate itself talks to your local connected tools that you have in your SOC, CSIRT, and so on. And you can instruct those tools to interconnect with a partner if both parties agree, so that you have those connections between MISP to MISP, for example, set up. And you can also instruct them to do other maintenance actions, configurations, and so on. But in the end, the actual data exchange between the tools will happen with the tool's native APIs. So Cerebrate is really just an instrumentation tool rather than a transport layer for your tools. So this is just a small example to what information about an organization would look like, very similar to what you know from MISP, with the additional changes that we now can assign some additional things like meta fields that are coming from customized data models to those individual data points. That means I could expand an organization with the fields that are relevant for the ANISA CSIRT network, for example, in this case, or the first data model coming from the first API, and so on. These are all just JSON configuration files that you can ingest and create manually. And then you can basically change the behavior of the tool and what sort of fields you can search on and display to users. The other thing we wanted to do, and this was really interesting to see the previous talk about the analyst capabilities, because that's exactly one of the things that we're looking for, but we didn't have a taxonomy for that yet. So we're absolutely going to look at that and incorporate that. One of the libraries that we also have in the tool is information about individuals. For example, for us in the CSIRT network, if we need help with a certain type of task, who can we turn to? Who has those capabilities? Which other organization that we trust with this, for example, would have those type of people that we could get in touch with. So this is what we want to be able to encode. So having a description and taxonomy for that is actually really useful for us, so that's great. So yeah, this is basically just showing the information about a list of organizations. We also carry a lot of metrics about the community. So we're building information about what sort of organizations, what sort of sectors, and so on are in your community. Again, not that interesting for smaller communities, but in our case, with our 1,500 users, or in the case of FIRST, where you have so many organizations, that becomes interesting to be able to get a rapid overview over what sort of sectors you have in your community and so on. And when you're trying to contact them, how can I find, for example, the Luxembourgish organizations that are in the chemical sector, for example, then these kind of questions should be easily answered by the tool. So right now we already have 3 of these mappings to the different APIs that for the different team registries that we're using included in the tool. So for the first directory, we also have mappers and basically ingestion scripts. So you can directly ingest the entire dataset from the first APIs and basically rebuild the entire team registry directly in Cerebrate in one shot. And also for ENISA and for the CSIRT constituency. So this is what it looks like for FIRST, for example. So this is team circles meta information that was pulled in from the FIRST API. So you can see here that all the meta fields that you would find there are also reflected through Cerebrate in this case. And again, management of the meta fields is super straightforward. JSON file, basically you just set what type of field you want to use for the various keys, and you can add additional validation scripts if you want to make sure that it's a bit more structured. So yeah, apart from that, for the sharing groups, this has been one of the really tricky things with MISP. Is propagating pre-created sharing groups has been really difficult because we attach that normally from MISP perspective whenever we exchange information, not directly sharing the sharing groups themselves. So we wanted to circumvent this, and we wanted to have a system that allows you to share these and maintain lists of sharing groups directly from one tool. Again, the way it works is very familiar for anyone that has used MISP before. So as for the signing part and for the encryption part that we are building with, together with MISP, as of a few months ago, we've introduced something completely new to MISP, where you can put events in so-called protected mode. That means any information you share will be cryptographically signed on synchronization, and you include the public keys that you trust with updates to that data. This is really interesting when you want to protect the data from tampering. Again, something that we didn't really need before because we had small communities, but nowadays with the geopolitical situations changing, suddenly we have different levels of trust in parts of our existing communities. So we want to make sure that the data doesn't get tampered with, even in trusted communities by third parties. So in those cases, we can now sign the information, and we can ensure that, that nobody tampers with the data, even in a large distributed MISP network. And in order to do this, one of the things that we need is a centralized cryptographic key database, and Cerebrate takes that role as well. So just an example of a key with its management. Something that we're also working on is to provide an open directory. So in the case of MISP, we want everyone to know what CIRCL's organization in MISP is. If you receive data from CIRCL through whichever network you're connected to, we want you to know who we are, what we are, and that the data is really coming from us. For this, we have a functionality that allows you to open up a completely publicly accessible, non-authenticated library of organizations. So we will host such an instance at CIRCL as well, where all the MISP can ingest this information from a publicly available source that you trust. As for the sharing itself, it works really similarly to MISP. So you interconnect Cerebrate nodes to each other by exchanging users, and then you can browse and decide what you want to pull in from the other community, what sharing groups you're interested in, what organization information you're interested in, pull those in, and synchronize those over to your instance. So again, this will look very familiar to those of you that have used MISP before, so I'm not going to go too deep into this because I think timing-wise should hurry up. So apart from that, we've built an API layer with some sample scripts that allow you to build your own integrations. So we are building some for the tools that we use ourselves at CIRCL or that we use in the CSIRT network. But obviously, as many teams as there are here, you probably have quite a few tools that we don't use or completely different use cases that we are not even aware of. In those cases, if you want to build integrations, we want to make it as easy as possible for you. So we have this API layer where you can build your own integrations and use the similar type of functionalities for debugging, managing, and interconnecting your tools. So if you're interested in any of those, we already have some sample connectors there. So we have the one for MISP there, as well as a skeleton connector that basically just contains the bare minimum to get started, and then with the function descriptions and signatures so that you can start building those out for your tool. So it's especially interesting if you're a developer of a tool, get in touch with us so we can help you get started with this, but it's rather straightforward to get going with it. So yeah, basically the idea is that the capabilities of these connectors are dealing with the configuration, fetching of the data related to the contact database, diagnosing issues with tools, as well as user management. So this is what we've built out also in MISP, but we're probably going to extend this list with more functionalities when someone gives us ideas of what we've missed, basically. So here is a small example. So this is a Cerebrate node that is connected to a local MISP instance. So we can see here that our Cerebrate can view the data contained in MISP. So data that is relevant to Cerebrate, that means anything with contact information. And we can directly pull that information up into Cerebrate and then distribute it to the wider community. So it's a very straightforward interaction. So one of the other things that is really annoying for us, again, is fleet management. So fleet management in the sense of we're running all these MISP instances. Sometimes we need to enroll a user in all of those. Sometimes we need to modify a new setting across all of our different MISP instances. And we would either do this via the API and write scripts for that, or we would basically do it manually, log into each of the instances, change those settings, and so on. So again, this is something that we wanted to extract from the tool, from MISP itself and move into this tool. So here's an example. We have 3 MISP instances connected to our Cerebrate, and we can directly view each of those MISP instances, change settings on them, enroll users, create sync connections, and so on. And when it comes to interconnection with other instances out there, once you have our Cerebrates connected, we can start a negotiation phase where we basically send an interconnection request to another organization that is also part of our community. We can expose what tools we want to have interconnections with in the first place. So we can say we have a MISP, we have an Intel MQ, for example, and these other tools that are deployed in our CSIRT. If anyone in our community wants to connect, reach out to us, and then we can start the negotiation. And the way it works is, within the tool itself, you would get an inbox message that says that, for example, the Belgian National CERT wants to connect to your MISP instance. Do you allow this connection to happen? If you do, it's a matter of just accepting the request. And then it goes back to the other Cerebrate, and the 2 nodes exchange the information needed to create the sync users, encode the information, and then do it automatically for you. So the idea is that you just give consent, and all the technical hurdles that we usually have with these exchanges happen automatically, transparent by the tool. So besides that, we have some other functionalities in there that might be interesting. We have all this information about the list of individuals within a community, and in order to manage mailing lists, we didn't want to make it hard on ourselves on having to maintain that in a different tool as well. So we're building integrations with mailing list management tools so that we can directly create these lists from Cerebrate itself, as well as basically manage all of these requests in a single place. So it has an inbox system where you can send these requests, messages between the different nodes, and simplify the exchanges. If you're interested in building integrations with Cerebrate, everything that we do via the API is documented via OpenAPI. So you have everything from sample payloads, possible responses, and the different endpoints all listed and explained. So just follow those instructions and see what you could do with the tool and build your integrations along with that. As for auditing, this is obviously a huge question for us. We have a very extensive logging system in the tool that is exposed to the API. So you can query the tool for anything from brute force attempts, failed authentications, modifications to data, and feed those to your different other logging tools that you're using. So, and something that will hopefully delight the MISP users that are looking forward to this stack coming to MISP. Finally, we'll have customizable UI. So in Cerebrate, we already have it in themes. The lack of dark mode has been haunting us for years now. So hopefully we'll get rid of that issue in MISP soon as well. So that's pretty much it. For the roadmap itself, we have quite a few things in mind, one of them being integration with ticketing system. From Sami's presentation yesterday in the workshop with the workflows, we also want workflow management to be moved to Cerebrate in the sense that you can see what workflows are enabled and share those between MISP instances from a central point. So this is going to be a next step. And we also want to be able to add a lot more tools and integrations with other different tools so that we can manage our communities from a central place. And this is where we need help. So if you have any tools to contribute to this idea and build integrations, or if you simply have ideas and say, okay, we're actually using this specific tool, why didn't you think of including that? In that case, let us know so that we can help you build that or build it ourselves. So that's basically it. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anyone is shy? So basically now with Cerebrate you can build a command and control infrastructure. Yeah, exactly. and a botnet of your MISP instances.
Exactly.
Is that the plan?
We kind of did that until now, but with curl scripts, so that was annoying. So now we have a nice UI for it, so that's
nice.
Makes life easier.
Okay, cool. So if you have questions to the tool, find Andras and the other CIRCL people around, or reach out over Twitter. They are amazingly responsive, also for ideas. So I can attest to that. Like if you throw an idea to them, they might implement it in like 30 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you.